Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the regular meeting of the Logan Municipal Council. Our opening ceremony this evening will be given by our very own Tom Jensen.
Good evening. A couple hours ago, Jeannie invited me to do it, and so I had a 45-minute talk prepared. I'm kidding, Jeannie. So some of you may remember that this past week we had an election. Some of you may be happy, and some of you may be upset, and some of you may not know what happened. That's what I'm going to talk about, hopefully. I really would like to focus on the idea of citizenship. Now, all of you are here, some of you by assignment because you're part of the staff. Some of you, of course, we are elected, so we chose to get into this. Some of you are participants from the community, and some of you are on television. But you are involved because you want to know what's going on, or at least try to influence or learn, and I commend you. I'd like to say that I think that there are three I's that describe good citizenship. The first is being involved, the second is being informed, and the third is for us who are elected to be independent. So let me just say one or two things about being involved. We don't get votes unless people vote. We don't get input unless people give us the input. And the fewer people give us input, the smaller is the pool of information we have. Back in Greece, they used to have an amphitheater where all the citizens of the town would gather and they would debate it and make decisions. So you were involved. Today, I think it's sad because we have a low turnout. In the county, what I learned is that we had 60%, higher than what I expected, but I think we have a lot of good citizens. That's 60%. Still, 40% are disenfranchised. They may complain about things, but they're not putting their input in. In Logan City, 32% voted in the last election. That's sad. And somehow people, I don't know how we change it, but maybe that's a manifest that we have to do that. But unless we're involved, we can't change things. We can't influence. We can't learn. The second I is being informed. I think far too many of our, especially our young people, don't know. They don't follow it. I know some of our kids, they just don't want to hear all the hubbub. I love it, and that's part of my personality. Is I love it, I read it, and I think it's interesting. My wife thinks I don't sleep very well, but I do. And my blood pressure is 90/55, so I'm doing just fine. But informed, I had a little brain, I don't know, an idea that came along, and I looked up something called Man on the Street interviews to see how people are thinking about things. And I listened to probably half an hour, 35 minutes of these interviews. If they weren't so tragic, it would be hilarious. So the man on the street in California, he asked a number of people who Bernie Madoff was. They had no idea. I think most of us would know. They asked what the IRA stood for. They had no idea. What's the street where the stock market is? You could, okay, Amy, what is it?
Wall Street.
Oh boy, she's,
Like, wow.
well, none of the people on this boardwalk in California knew. They asked who the Vice President of the United States was. They didn't know. They asked who the Vice President under Barack Obama. They didn't know. I remember hearing one where they asked, what are the three branches of government? And somebody said, well, it's the left, the right, and the center. they were asking people what should they do about reparations. And they all said, yeah, we ought to be paying reparations to our black population. And they said, how much? Oh, $1,500, maybe $2,000 a month. Oh, great. So, do you have $20 on you? Because let's have the first black man that comes along. You just give him, just start up. Oh, no, I can't do that. No, I'm sorry. I gotta get out. So they talk easy when it's somebody else's money. When they talked about banned speech, one of the comments was, I think everybody ought to be banned. When they asked about Memorial Day, one person said, I have no clue. Another said it was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Another's when Neil Armstrong. And in other words, these people we are entrusting with selecting leaders in our country. I think it's a sad thing. The third is the idea of being independent, and that's a little more philosophical. And I love this quote by Edmund Burke. He was a British statesman, economist, and philosopher during the time of our revolution. His quote said, your representative owes you not his industry only, but his judgment. And he betrays instead of serving you if he sacrifices it to your opinion. Translated, it means we elect people for their wisdom or judgment and also the effort that they put into it. But then you can't control that person because you voted for them. In other words, we should be independent from people that say, yeah, but I voted for you. We need to use our judgment to make the right decision. We need to listen to people from both sides or all sides and then make a wise choice. So anyway, that's my little 20 minutes on citizenship. I just hope that people will become more involved because that makes us a much better community. So let's say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'll leave you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Tom. You always have something inspirational to say.
Thank you.
Next item on our agenda is the acceptance of the minutes of our last meeting, the approval of the agenda for this evening.
Can I move to make it shorter?
That depends on you.
What would you like to cut out?
The opening ceremony.
I would move acceptance of the minutes and approval of tonight's agenda.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Our 2022 regular meeting schedule, we have one more meeting in 2022. That will be December the 6th. We will not be holding a meeting on December the 20th. This is the time on the agenda where we take questions and comments for the mayor and or the council on items that are not otherwise on the agenda. If you have something you wish to say to the council or the mayor, please come forward and state your name. Seeing no one, we'll move forward. Mayor, I will leave it to you.
I'll turn the time over to Craig Carlston. This is required by state law that we have an annual training to remind us how to keep our meetings transparent and open to the public.
Right, yeah, every year we have to have this Open and Public Meetings Act training. You all are very well versed in this, so we'll touch on just a few highlights tonight. I think it's most important just to understand the intent of the act. Public bodies exist to aid in the conduct of people's business, and we should take public bodies should take their actions openly and conduct their deliberations openly. Definition of a meeting, so this act doesn't apply unless there's a meeting. The meeting is the convening of a public body with a quorum present, whether in person or by electronic means, for the purpose of discussing, receiving comments from the public about, or acting upon a matter over which the public body has jurisdiction or advisory power. So this is going to include workshops, closed sessions, electronic meetings, that sort of thing. Meeting does not include a chance or social meeting. But if we remember, the intent of the act is to do the public's business openly, so we shouldn't use those things to circumvent the Open Public Meetings Act. In order to have a meeting, you have to have a quorum, a simple majority, public notice for a meeting. There's different
Excuse
notices.
me, for our group, it's 3, correct?
Yeah, for
Okay.
this council is 3, that's correct. Public notice for a meeting, at least 24 hours notice. Different actions by the council will require different noticing, but at least 24 hours for any item on the agenda, unless it's an emergency meeting. Items on the agenda, they need to state with reasonable specificity to notify the public what the council is going to be discussing. And items raised by the public but not on the agenda, we can discuss those items, but we can't take any action on those. Closed meetings can be held if a quorum is present. The meeting has to start out as an open meeting for which proper notice was given, and then 2/3 of the members present have to vote to approve the closing of the meeting. And there are certain specified reasons why we can close the meeting. Those are in state code, but most common are those discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual, pending or imminent litigation, real estate transactions. You all are well familiar with electronic meetings after COVID. We had several of those. And disruption of meetings. Individuals can be removed from a public meeting if they willfully disrupt the meeting to the extent orderly conduct is seriously compromised. And there are some criminal penalties if we intentionally violate closed meeting provisions. That's our training for the year. Any questions? Okay.
Sorry.
You weren't asleep.
No, I wasn't asleep, I was reading something, sorry. Council business, we'll move on to council business. Planning Commission is meeting this Thursday. They did not meet last Thursday, so I have no report. And I will turn the time over to Rich to do the financial statement presentation.
Thank you, Council. I will give just a brief introduction to the financial statements and then turn our time over to Stephen Rowley, who's from K&C CPAs, our external auditors. The financial statements are online, so anyone who would like to review them can access those on our website, go to the Finance Department, and under our financial information is our fiscal year 22 financial statements, as well as, I think, our last 10, so they can read until they can't see anymore. However, if you only have a few minutes to look at the financial statements, I recommend you look from pages 13 to 21. That is what we call management's discussion and analysis. It's a compact view of the overall city, and it gives some good information and compares it to prior years. If you have a little bit more time, look at the actual financial statements themselves, compare it to previous years' financial statements. And then if you really want to know what's going on, unfortunately, you need to read the notes, because there is an incredible amount of information within the notes to the financial statements describing in fair amount of detail the transactions of the city. So some people might wonder why they didn't know about something. It's hidden in plain sight. Unfortunately, it's 100 pages, but if you want to know, that's where the information is. Also, people are also welcome to call me if they have any questions. The fiscal year 22 financial statements, which we call our annual comprehensive financial report, ACFR. Our 22 ACFR, in my opinion, shows that we have good reserves built in each one of our many funds. This hasn't always been the case. For instance, our golf course hasn't had good reserves. However, over the last several years of good revenue in these funds, we've built up good reserves even in our golf course. I think our financial reports show a significant investment in capital, both in our governmental funds, which primarily is infrastructure, buildings, those types of things, as well as in our enterprise funds, where there is infrastructure to support those services, water lines, sewer lines, electrical lines, some of those types of things. A significant investment in capital, which is also very responsible. I think our financial statements show that we're in a good financial position heading into uncertain times, which is exactly where I would like to be. However, the future is somewhat uncertain, and we'll address those things as we move forward. The budget sets the plan. The financial statements present the results. And I think we should be proud of the results that we have in our financial statements. We should continue to be responsible, and we should continue to do the things that we're doing, investing in our capital infrastructure, because it'll pay dividends in the future. Any questions from the council or the mayor?
I don't understand what I'm talking about here, but I heard that this recent cryptocurrency thing is twice as big as Enron. In other words, there's a threat out there someplace. I don't know, does that have any ripple effect to us at all? Enron did.
It would be tangential at best. It would be simply because the market is shaken, we would be shaken a little bit. However, we have nothing to do with it. As you read in the financial statements, it's note 2 that refers to all of our cash and investments. You'll see that we're very limited as to what we can invest in. We cannot invest in equities, for instance. And equities would be the thing that would be most affected by some of the things that are happening. We can only invest in debt securities and other highly rated investments. So I'm sure it would affect us simply because we are part of the market. We do have investments that we're holding. However, it would be only limited to the effect that's on the overall market.
I just had to ask that.
And cryptocurrency and NFTs and all that fun stuff has never made any sense to me. So the fact that it's tanking actually reaffirms my confidence in the market.
So how did our EMS fund do since we just finished the first full year of operations with that? Because I know some citizens were concerned about that divestment of.
As I was concerned, and our fire chief especially was concerned about. However, the fund seems to be operating as expected, actually better than expected. However, there are many risks associated with that activity, and so we are in the process of building reserves. I would like our reserves to be a little bit higher in that fund. However, it's operating a little bit better than expected at this point, which is great. Hopefully that continues. With that, we will, unless there's any other questions.
Well, Rich, I was just going to say, is there anything that you would specifically like to highlight for the council that you feel is important in the financial statements?
Kind of highlighted the golf course reserves and
Okay.
operating revenues. That's something to be interested in. Our electric fund as well. We're in a really good position as far as the electric fund goes. However, there are significant issues with obtaining source power, and so that is a concern. However, I don't know that we could be in a better position to face those challenges than we are currently. Having said that, we are going to have significant investments in the future, and we're going to need the reserves that we have in that electric fund to meet some of those challenges, obtaining our own source power, some of those types of things, as we wait for renewable sources to actually provide baseload power. Let's see if there's anything else. The general fund has fairly significant revenue increase over the prior years. However, most of that has to do with federal grants that we received. So you'll see that in kind of the intergovernmental section of our financial report. Our main sources of revenue, sales tax, property tax, franchise tax, are all performing well. Although there is concern on the distant horizon, probably fiscal year 23, end of fiscal year 23, where maybe there's some slowdown in the local economy, and that would be cause for concern. There have been various ripples. We had one yesterday with Icon that we should be paying attention to. Not panicking at this point, just paying attention to and watching and being careful. With that, I'll turn over some time to Steve Rowland, to give us the audit opinions on the financial statements.
Thank you, Rich. My name is Stephen Rowley. I was the engagement partner on the Logan City's financial statement audit for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2022. Our job as auditors is to give an opinion on whether the financial statements that have been prepared by the city are materially correct. And in doing that, we have to make sure we properly plan to perform the audit. So we plan to perform the audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, as well as government auditing standards, which is a step above the generally accepted auditing standards. And we'll get into a little bit of the details of that momentarily. We also have to be independent of the city. We also have to exercise all of our professional responsibilities and duties related to that. So our opinion is on page 11. If you have that in front of you, or want to just bookmark it for later, this is some riveting reading.
Oh, come on, of course it is.
Well, I'm not being sarcastic at all. It is really helpful and useful information, so I do encourage people that are interested in looking over the financials to feel free to look over that. But as it states there at the top of the report, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and the aggregate remaining fund information of the city of Logan, Utah as of June 30th, 2022, and the respective changes in financial position and where applicable cash flows thereof for the year then ended in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. That is the longest run-on sentence I've ever read that states that it is an unmodified opinion on the financials. That is the highest opinion you can receive on the financial statements. The rest of this report goes into how we determine that. How do we come up with that opinion? Well, we perform tests on a sample basis. We do substantive testing. We do inquiries. We ask broad questions. We dig into the numbers to make sure that the numbers included in this report can be relied upon. And it also discusses what's the responsibility of management in all of this. Well, management is supposed to oversee the day-to-day activities, make sure that the assets of the city, which means cash, infrastructure, and all of that, is handled appropriately and in accordance with accounting principles, as well as it's properly safeguarded so that it can't be taken or stolen or abused or misappropriated. Our responsibility, as I mentioned, is to plan and perform our audits so that we can be confident that the financial statements are materially correct. That does not mean that we've looked at every single transaction. We could never possibly look at every transaction. But through our sampling and test work, we are comfortable in our opinion that these financial statements can be relied upon and that they are materially correct. The report also talks about required supplementary information. What that includes is things like the management's discussion and analysis, the pension schedules that are in the back. We talk about the city's proportionate net pension asset this year related to the Utah retirement systems, as well as the budget to actual schedules that are in the back. And our opinion as it relates to that is we do not audit those specifically to give an opinion on those sections, but we do compare that to the underlying accounting information, and we compare its consistency with what we have audited. So our opinion related to that as a whole is that it is materially correct as well. Then there are sections that are called supplementary information. So this includes the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So this is related to the single audit that the city underwent, which means that because the city has federal funds, there are strings attached to those funds, and we as auditors need to come in and make sure that the city is complying with all of those many requirements related to the federal funds. So we'll look at that report shortly as well. And in our opinion, it states there that combining individual non-major fund financial statements and the schedule of expenditures and federal awards are fairly stated in all material respects in relation to the basic financial statements as a whole. Additionally, there is a change in accounting principle that occurred this year with Government Accounting Standards Board Statement number 87, which is related to leases. We've probably talked about this for the last 2 or 3 years as being forthcoming. It arrived, happy day, whatever. We did implement the standard. The city did a wonderful job at ensuring that the city complied with those standards. So there is a note there just describing that there was a change in accounting principle. There's a footnote in the back of the report that kind of explains the impact of that change. And you're welcome to contact me directly if you have further questions. Rich and Ruben are extremely knowledgeable on this as well, so I'm sure they'll be able to answer any questions you may have with that.
I think I've heard enough at the audit committee meetings about leases.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Made some changes this year.
Yep, definitely. And then the last part of this report is there's a report that's required for government auditing standards. So what this says is, look in the back, there's a report, so let's go look there. And that is starting on page 111, so clear at the back.
And that audit, the single audit, is triggered when you have a certain level of federal grants?
Yes, yeah, if you've expended $750,000 or more of federal grant monies, then that triggers
The single audit.
additional procedures.
Okay.
Yeah. So this first report is just the reporting under government auditing standards. So all governmental entities in the state of Utah are required to be audited under government auditing standards. Now what this does is we have to consider the internal controls of the entity as we plan and perform our audit. So we look to see whether controls are implemented and whether or not we want to rely on those controls. And we do testing related to those controls to ensure that they appear to be operating, but we're not required to test them to the extent where we can give an opinion on the effectiveness of those controls. But what we are required to do under government auditing standards is to disclose to you if there are any weaknesses or deficiencies or problems with the internal controls that the city has in place. And as we performed our procedures over internal controls, we did not identify any deficiencies or weaknesses in those internal controls. That does not mean that there may not be a weakness that exists that will went unidentified, but we did not identify anything, and over the years, we feel very strongly the city does have strong controls. There's a lot of layers of segregation of duty, which means there's no one person that has control over everything. So we've eliminated opportunities to prevent or misappropriate assets. So although we don't give an opinion on internal controls, we do say that there are no deficiencies or weaknesses identified. Additionally, government auditing standards requires that we consider the city's compliance with laws, rules, and regulations, that if there was non-compliance with those, that it could have a material effect on the financials. Now what that means is, say for example, if there was an OSHA violation, that could have a monetary material effect on the financials if the city were to get sued, for example, for something of that nature. So as we looked over the various areas of compliance that are applicable, we did not identify any instances of non-compliance that would cause a material mistake in the financials or have a material effect on those. So that is a high and positive report we can provide on that in relation to government auditing standards. So very well done on the city's part as well. If you want to turn the page, this is our report on uniform guidance, or it's commonly known as the single audit. So our responsibility here is to look at how the city expended the federal funds and whether they complied with the various compliance requirements that the federal government asks us to look into. They have a huge compliance supplement that they put out with lists and lists of compliance requirements that we have to test. So with this report, this year we tested the state and local fiscal recovery funds, otherwise known as the ARPA funds. It's the second cousin to the CARES Act money that we got the last couple of years as well. So very similar compliance requirements, but it was a lot of money. It was over $10 million that was expended during this last fiscal year. So we do give an opinion on the city's compliance related to that. And then it is that the city complied in all material respects with the compliance requirements in the uniform guidance. Additionally, we do look at the internal controls over compliance. And just like the last report, we look at those controls to determine the extent of testing, did not give an opinion, and we did not identify any weaknesses or deficiencies in those internal controls related to compliance. So that is a very good thing to have. With a lot of money going through, we want to ensure that the federal funds are being spent properly and handled accordingly. There is a third, maybe fourth report, I can't remember how many we've gone over now. If you go to page 117, this is the report in relation to the state compliance audit guide. So the federal government has their compliance supplements, the state has their state compliance audit guide. In similar fashion, the state puts out a list of compliance requirements that we need to come in and test to determine whether the city complied with these compliance requirements. So about a third of the way down the page, you see that bulleted, indented list: budgetary compliance, fund balance, etc. Those were the areas specifically required to be tested this year from the state compliance audit guide. And just like the last two reports we just looked at, it's kind of in two parts. We test specific instances of compliance as well as the controls related to those compliance requirements. We give an opinion on the city's compliance with those compliance requirements, and at the bottom of page 117, it states, in our opinion, the city of Logan complied in all material respects with these state compliance requirements referred to above for the year ended June 30th, 2022. So unmodified opinion, there were no findings related to that. Flip the page, this last part is related to the internal controls related to compliance. Just like before, we don't test those controls, but we do consider them in testing the compliance requirements. And if there were any weaknesses, we are required to communicate those to you as well. And as it states here, there were no weaknesses or deficiencies in the internal control related to compliance that were identified. So as you can see, there's no other pages after that, so there were no findings, there were no misstatements. Some of the other things we're required to go over with you is how the audit went. We report to you, the council, as you are here to oversee everything. So the audit went very smoothly. The accounting team and finance team here at the city does a very good job of keeping things organized on a daily basis. They provided everything we asked for without hesitation. All the inquiries we made with city staff were answered promptly and without hesitation. Very positive experience for it and a lot of work. And it's not just the finance team that does this. It truly is a team effort with all levels of the city having to be in cooperation to make that happen. There's only so much council can do. There's only so much management can do. There's only so much all the staff and the rest of the people that work do. There's a lot of hands in the pie in order to make it work, and it works well. So we always appreciate our opportunity to be associated with the city as the independent auditors, and happy to answer any questions you might have about the audit this time.
Any questions?
So people may not realize, but Jeannie and I both still run the audit committee, and we meet quarterly with Rich and with the auditors. So some of this is information that we've had a chance to stay on top of over the course of the year. I'm always happy when I leave the meetings to hear how well managed our finances are.
Yes, I agree. But we also spend a great deal of time asking questions and making sure that we understand what's happened. And so I feel like my questions have all been answered, but I'm not answering them in this meeting. Go ahead.
Just curious, how big is the team of auditors that complete this report?
So generally on site, we have 2 or 3 people. This last year we had myself and Gary Pennington, so we had 2 of the 3 partners here on site for that week. We had 2 people working in the office during that week as well. They've been working on things since July. They sent out a questionnaire and things like that. But then after that, it was still another, I think, 2 or 3 weeks going through all of the documentation we received, follow-up emails and questions. So we generally have 4 to 5 people on it each year for probably 3 weeks total, which is quite a bit, but in other cities that are even smaller sometimes take longer because they're not quite as well prepared as the city of Logan is. So it really is quite an efficient way to do things. You've got a great experienced staff that understands things here, understands what we need as auditors. They maintain the proper supporting documentation. So it is really quite a smooth process comparatively to other smaller cities that may not have as well prepared.
I know we're responsible, and I'm not qualified to do these things, so I appreciate you. I also appreciate Rich and your team, because I think we've always had total confidence, and it's flawless. And Mayor, I know that you're responsible, and I think it's running well, and I appreciate that.
Exactly. I think we have a good relationship, and we're happy to provide counsel, of course, with any information, answer any questions, as we are for the general public. I mean, anyone, as Rich mentioned, is welcome to come in and sit down with him if there's something they don't understand. So we do try to be transparent. Rich, again, has received last year he received the award about having flawless documents. And again, just the way in which things are presented, which is meant to be friendly to the public and accessible to the public. And again, as he said, the past 10 years, everything's on the website. Anyone's welcome to take a look.
Any other questions?
No.
Thank you so much for
Thank you.
being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the report.
Thanks, Steve.
And thank you, Rich.
Thank you. Again, team effort.
I know it's a team effort, but teams always have a leader, and the leader sets the pace and sets the expectations, and
And that's you guys.
I thought it was Ruben.
yeah, maybe it was
Not
Ruben.
Yes, we have a good team.
And despite you, it's still good.
Oh.
We golf together, so we can tease.
Okay, we're going to move now to our action items. Our first public hearing this evening is on the moderate income housing plan amendment. We had a long presentation last time regarding that. Are there any questions you would like to ask Mike before we open it to the public? Or would you like to see more of the presentation or anything? Let me know.
I am good.
Do you want specific questions before public hearing or after?
If they are clarification questions, perhaps before, but
So I guess the only question I had was in looking over the housing strategies that the Planning Commission recommended. You've got U as one of the ones selected, which is a moderate income housing project for residents who are disabled or 55 or older. Which goal, as I was reading through that, which goal does that one fall under of the 8 goals that were identified? Or is it kind of in all of them?
That was you, right?
That was you.
It is under,
Right there.
8.
8, thank you. By the time I got to 8, I may have been not reading as closely as I was earlier. Thank you.
anything else?
No.
This is a public hearing. Any member of the public who wishes to speak to this issue, please come to the microphone, state your name, and take 3 minutes or less.
Dr. Gail Yost, I live in Logan. I wanted to know basically how much are we in deficit? If you could say a percentage or what age group or what the 80% is, that would be helpful. 80% of median income and what the median income is, to know how much we need to build.
Mike, can
Want me to
you?
answer that?
Yes, please, since I can't.
We need to build the same amount we did the last 10 years.
We need to build the same amount we built the last 15 or 20 years, actually. So based on the HUD AMI income level for this region, it's $71,000. The target income for folks at 80% or higher is $59,300. So approximately out of the households in Logan, there's 18,000 plus, about 11,294 are at or below that number.
65%.
So 65% of our households are at or below 80% of the NY.
And do some of this 11,294 actually own homes or buying homes?
Well, I mean, we can project the number of owner-occupied versus renter, but this assumes that whoever comprises that household is either own or rent, one of the two. And we have some numbers in here that approximate what the need is based on income level. And those numbers generally, let's see if I can find it. Here's what we need to build over the next 8 years, since through 2030, in order to satisfy the needs within those income brackets. And it's kind of based on the average growth rate, so it kind of is going to fluctuate. But just to meet the basic 80% or less, you need at least 1,290 units just to meet that if we have a 1% growth rate. So anywhere from 1,200 to 2,700 is what we need.
Do you have any other information, like any assistance any of these families may be getting, or from what agency they may be assisted, anything like that?
We don't administer a housing program. It's done through BRAG, so they have Section 8 vouchers and other assistance. We have numbers that we can approximate who gets tax credits, but we don't know what individuals get for housing credit or how many. I think that's public information. You probably get it from BRAG.
I can get it from Bragg. I'm on a homeless committee.
Yeah.
But also I worked for them for years in the 80s. So I understand what you're saying, believe it or not. But thank you very much for answering the question.
Is there anyone else who wishes to make a comment? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council for a decision.
So I think this is a really interesting statistic when you think about just housing in general, because you realize there's a shortage of housing or a need for housing across all income levels.
Right.
Moderate income is obviously much more critical need, it feels like, because those are individuals who might not have other alternatives, but kind of ties into the conversation we had, what was that, 2 months ago when they presented the countywide plan? And there's holes everywhere. So I think whatever we can do to help improve access is great. I like this format with the goals. Thank you for doing this compared to the plan.
It's a little easier to follow.
Yeah, much easier to follow, except for finding the U.
It's the one with the big arrow by it.
Yeah.
Hard to see.
Well, I kind of ignore the U because I'm more the USU. I don't really want to pay attention to the U. But
Should have put it in red.
Thought that crosses my mind, this is comprehensive, I appreciate it. I mean, it's just a whole lot of information, is that we keep building kind of the same thing, you know, the stacked housing units, apartments, and that there's a need for them because they fill up as soon as they're prescribed. But I would kind of hope that we somehow find more ways to do single family or attached homes that are more friendly to children, families.
But this doesn't necessarily get at structure type and the type, we want to anticipate or see. This really looks at just the availability of any kind of housing for these different income ranges.
so what's the plan as far as reporting back on what goals we're achieving? What do you anticipate community development will do this like quarterly or biannually? Or, I mean, I know there's set timeline goals, but how do you anticipate?
Yeah, so we have to report back to the state by October of every year. And so what we'll do is we have a lot of goals, so the first year will be a little bit busy, but we will report on the progress we make over 2023 on some of the easier ones, like the low-hanging fruit, ADUs, things like that. And then we can come back to you in October, November with the status. And we will assume that some of you will be involved in some of these issues as we progress forward. So, but we can report back formally if you like.
Okay. Will there be updates in that monthly community development report as well, or is that?
I didn't anticipate doing that, no.
No, okay.
No.
Will you use some of this information to maybe adjust the fluff?
Yeah, this actually is an amendment to the general plan, so it does feed into that. And this will help inform the update we do in 2024.
Sure. I was just up in Jackson, and I know they have major problems with moderate income housing. They've done some different things where they've got developments where there's condos and there's multifamily housing and there is workforce housing all in one. And I was actually quite intrigued with what they were trying to do to help some of their more moderate income residents.
Yeah, Park City's got that same model that they
Yeah.
follow for some of their projects.
It was really nice. It was really well done. So I was impressed.
I think the hard thing with some of those, though, is as people's income rises,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
especially if they're owned, it's how do you, the equity that's built as the market rises, how do you manage?
Well, the condos were only $5 million, so.
Yeah. I mean, it does become
Very
an
affordable,
issue when as the market rises, if it's designated moderate income.
Well, the interesting thing is some places, they put a cap on that.
Yeah,
That,
as to what they can sell it for.
yep.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Do you need a vote?
Yep,
Yep. Resolution.
We need, did we get every?
yep.
Quick question. So in the summit last week, in that panel of people the builders, the mayor, they mentioned something that we are missing a type of zoning. And I don't know if just, I think it was most of the valley with smaller lots.
Now, remember, that was the mayor of Hyde Park, and their lots are quarter of an acre and bigger.
But the builder, he's the one that mentioned actually this part.
And he wants lots that, he wants to go down as small as 3,500 square feet for some detached single family. So, I mean, I think we're willing to explore different alternatives, maybe some different housing types. It's not a detached single family, but not a, 4-unit townhome complex. There's things that we don't see built here, maybe duplexes, with 0 lot lines. There's other things out there, but I think they're driven by profit motive. That's really what they're trying to do, is build as many homes on as small as lots as possible, because their costs equate to a linear frontage of lots. So every additional foot I have to go with infrastructure, it means that much more out of my pocket. So if they can squish it down and have more houses on the same amount of distance, that means more money for them. So, and we say it's all about providing affordable housing, but I mean, they're a business and they want to make money, so.
Thank you.
I think we tried hard with mixed use, to create some of those differences with difference in housing types, and where you could get, if you created more open space, you could get more density and things like that. So we're working toward that. I believe there are some communities in the valley that haven't started that path yet. Anything else?
I move to accept Resolution 22-46.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks, Mike, for your department's
Thank
hard
you.
work on
Yep.
this.
It's a lot of work.
Our next public hearing is a budget adjustment. Rich, would you mind just running through it?
A request to appropriate $6,800 of donated funds toward the police taser replacement. Request to appropriate $154,105 of a grant. It's state shared revenue for operational improvements at our 911 fund. Request to appropriate $600,000 of additional commercial connection fees in our electric fund that we would then appropriate for the cost associated with that construction, particularly the infrastructure required for delivering electrical service. Request to appropriate $435,000 of electric fund reserves for the completion of substation 9 and 10. And lastly, a $792 grant the library received for Wi-Fi hotspots.
Mayor, do you know where substation 9 and 10 are located?
Yes, 9 is the new one required that we built to accommodate Sativa and other growth in the southwest. So
Okay.
it's on 10th West, almost to US 8991. 10 is the one at Utah State University that's kind of upgrading the Hillcrest area substation that's kind of tucked under the hill,
Okay.
just below University, below 12.
We leased the land from the university for that substation.
Correct.
I just wanted people to understand which substations we were talking about.
Again, these are 2 brand-new substations to, accommodate the growth in load that we've had in the city in the last few years. So.
Right.
And we have a lease.
We do.
We have a place, yeah.
It's a big one.
One of those great leases. Are there any questions of Rich before I open it to public hearing?
I want to know what happens with the used tasers, Rich.
With the used taser?
Yeah.
Or we're cheapest.
They go to the
Where's-
auditors, is
But
that it?
all of our property is disposed of through our purchasing manager, so it follows our code.
All right, we'll check with the chief next time. So.
You try to buy one?
No, I probably should go to the auditors. So.
For those unruly gardeners.
Yes, no, I should go to the
That's a
auditors.
good idea.
Captain Hooley left. No. Okay.
Our security.
This is a public hearing. If there are any members of the public who wish to make a statement or ask a question, and now he
There
returns.
he is.
I'm out here.
We asked what happened to the used tasers.
We have not replaced those yet. We
What
will
happened?
go through the process that we always do,
Yeah.
Which is,
going through the finance department, through the first.
Okay. Awesome.
do they sell them? or-
No, they'll be destroyed.
Oh, okay.
They'll be destroyed, they have to go through that process.
Oh, okay. Answers that
Very
question.
good. Thank you very much.
As I said, this is a public hearing. Any member of the public who wishes to speak, please come forward and state your name.
Again, Dr. Gale, yes. It's just a simple question, and he actually made it more necessary to me. Do all of these things have to be purchased ahead or after, or is there a mixture of how they're purchased and when the money comes in?
In relation to this council meeting?
Yes, well, and in relation to this public hearing, yes. Does the money come to you or through you and it gets requested, but it hasn't been spent yet?
I see what you're saying.
That kind of thing.
Oftentimes with these grants, we'll receive the grant authorization beforehand. However, the funds cannot be spent until council appropriates it. In the case of, for instance, the connection fees at the electric fund, at $600,000, we are in a deficit situation, or we're very close to being in a deficit situation there. We spent most of our budget. But the typical process is that the council appropriates, and all departments know they are not authorized to spend until council appropriates the funds. In the case of the grants, which is 99% of the adjustments, we can't spend it until council appropriates it.
Okay, just a simple question. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the council.
I would move acceptance of resolution 22-44.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move now to our workshop items. Our first workshop item is Mike Zollinger, Global Property Annexation.
Yep, this is an annexation request that fell under our new process that we just adopted, where it went to planning commission and came back to you. Just a little under 19 acres up off of 10th West and about 200 north. Global Property, they actually own the property to the east and then to the southeast, so this is a mislabel. But they're requesting to come in. Planning commission looked at it. Didn't have issues with it. The current SLUP is industrial. The current zoning around it is industrial. The proposals come in as industrial. And there's one issue with the plat, just formality, they've got it annexed to the center line of the road, but that's what we'll work on. The Jeannie had a question before, it's been a little while, about how this interplays with the airport overlay zones. And this is the Logan Airport, this is the site, so it's not within their, I guess, sphere or approach zones, but it's within their traffic pattern zones, and the rest of the property is. And they do have some critical lands on the site, some wetlands, they'll do the delineation before they, or when they apply for development. So the planning commission recommended industrial, and here you go. Happy answering questions.
No protests from the dash.
No.
Okay.
So that airport restricts height and also like towers or?
And use.
Yeah, it restricts basically building height, and then it has the overall use of the property within that zone. In this case, they want to do industrial, cold storage type of thing, so that would be compatible with the airport zone.
Okay.
Don't care if they're flying over.
But if they wanted to put a house there, it would not.
That much I do know.
Cold storage, good place for planes to fly over.
I guess.
Don't think the cold storage is going to complain.
No, the cold storage isn't going to complain. And theoretically, they're off to the side, and if the plane is flying over them, they're in more trouble than they need to
That's
be.
right. Wrong flight
So
path.
Mike, actually, I do have a question. So, never mind. You've got it cached. As I say, there's another owner listed around there, but. never
Good.
mind.
Okay, sure,
Thanks, Mike.
thank you.
Amanda?
Okay, I'm presenting the Community Development Block Grants Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, or CAPER, for the 2021 project year, which ran from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th of 2022. The CAPER reviews the progress of the 2021 Annual Action Plan and the 5-year Consolidated Plan. The 2021 Annual Action Plan is the third plan for the 5-year Consolidated Plan that runs from 2019 through 2023. The main objectives of the CON Plan and the Annual Action Plan are to invest 40% towards infrastructure in LMI areas, 10% towards the remediation of access and mobility barriers, and 30% towards community needs that support LMI residents, 20% towards public facility, and 10% towards public services. During project year 2021, a total of 8 infrastructure projects were completed. 2 of the projects were funded in 2021 and 8 were funded in previous years, benefiting approximately 28,510 residents, of which 63% are considered LMI. The Riverside Drive project was funded in 2021, installed 722 feet of sidewalk, curb and gutter along the east side of Riverside Drive between 1st and 2nd North.
Nice.
Funded in 2020 and 2021, the 500 West 400 South sidewalk project installed 4 new ADA ramps and 1,230 feet of sidewalk, curb and gutter, and landscaping along 500 West between 3rd and 4th South, and along 400 South between 5th and 6th West. Funded in 2020, the 500 North, 500 East ADA ramp project reconstructed the intersection and installed 4 new ADA ramps. Funded in 2020, the 600 North, 200 West sidewalk project installed 4 ADA ramps and 300 feet of sidewalk and curb and gutter along the southwest leg of the intersection.
How come didn't they do a park strip?
I'm sorry, what?
Why did they not do a park strip? Why did they put that right against the road?
Probably wasn't enough setback.
I'm sure there wasn't right away.
Yeah.
Probably not enough. Given the width of the road, probably, right, Paul?
Okay.
Funded in 2020, the 750 North, 600 East sidewalk project installed 450 feet of sidewalk, a retaining wall, and also driveway reconstruction along 600 East at 750 North.
That looks so nice.
That looks nice. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing.
But I would say reconstruction is not exactly the right word. It would, in some cases, it was driveway construction for the first time.
For the first time ever. No, that looks
Again,
really
that's
good.
just a heavily used pedestrian area being near the university, and there were just bits and pieces and sections, and we now have
It's very nice.
It looks great. Yeah, that looks really good.
sidewalk.
And the Riverside Drive is being used.
And that's a
lot.
huge safety.
That was a big
It's a big
safety
deal.
problem, yeah.
The 600 East Pedestrian Improvements Project, funded in 2018, installed new ADA ramps at the 600 East and 700 North intersection and approximately 798 feet of sidewalk along the south side of 700 North between 6th and 7th East.
Again, that was a big project, so we just kind of took sections and chipped away at it and got it completed, so.
Funded in 2018, the Bridger Park Pathways Project installed approximately 1,800 feet of sidewalk connecting the playground to the public garden, pickleball courts, and the bike park. And funded in 2017, the Canyon Road Trail Project installed approximately 270 feet of sidewalk, curb and gutter, 4 ADA ramps, some trail safety fencing, pedestrian crossing beacons, landscaping, and sprinklers. During project year 2021, there were 5 community needs projects completed, benefiting approximately 15,539 residents, of which 65% are considered LMI. The Whittier Center was not finished, so that will be reported on next year's CAPER. That's it. Any questions?
Thanks, Linda.
You bet.
Great progress.
I love it to drive through the city and see things that we've approved through the years.
Yeah.
Coming to fruition?
Pardon?
Coming to fruition?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice. Next two are you, Paul. I understand we have some discussion about one of them.
For Amy's request to shorten the agenda, we will probably withdraw these 2 items from the agenda because a vacation is not necessary for this. We thought it was, but it's not. But if you'd like a description of what's going on, I can give it to you.
I think it's okay. If you don't want to do it, you're welcome to talk about it.
Best workshops ever. Thanks, Paul.
But the reason-
Thanks for sharing that information, Paul.
So I did understand that the reason that we would not vacate has to do with UDOT and an expansion of the road eventually.
Correct. That's not why we're not doing the vacation, but it's part of the 3200 South project that UDOT is doing. It is existing Logan City right-of-way, 2 small pieces that will become UDOT right-of-way with that project. When we vacate right-of-way, it no longer is public land and is dedicated to adjacent property, private property owners. So this is not the correct process for what we're doing.
Okay.
That's why we're not vacating.
So you are pulling it off.
It will become UDOT right-of-way, but it's going from right-of-way to right-of-way.
Yeah.
And you don't vacate in that circumstance.
So we'll probably see this in 2 weeks as a workshop in a different format.
If, as I understand, it won't need to go through city council.
This won't need to because it's not a significant parcel of property.
Okay,
Yeah, it's,
so we can just do that in terms of.
So we don't get a vacation?
No vacation.
No vacation for
You
Craig.
don't get a vacation.
yeah, the 2 parcels together are less than half of a tenth of an acre.
Wow.
To give you an idea, they're just
Half of a tenth?
That's a 20th.
So half of a tenth.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks, Paul.
I had my slide rule.
Wow.
Oh, that's
Okay, Russ. It seems you get the next
Rough,
two.
yeah, it's rough.
I hate losing to Paul. He's going to win tonight because I'm going to have to take a minute on these 2 rezones. So Planning Commission reviewed 2 rezones in their final meeting in October. And they are ordinances 2021 and 22 for review tonight. The first is Watermark. Let me go to the start, sorry.
The infamous,
I believe we've heard quite a bit about that.
infamous water.
Yes, the infamous Watermark. So this is down on the south end of town, just south of 2200 South and west of 1200 West. It's actually 3 parcels. They total just over 11 acres. And it's currently ag land. There's one older home that was built in the 50s, as well as a couple barns, and then there's 2 ponds, open water ponds. This area was annexed into Logan City in 2007. And the applicant is requesting a rezone to MR30. The FLUP calls this area out as commercial. It was recently rezoned to commercial from RC to commercial about 1 year ago. The surrounding area, this is a little bigger picture. We have about 50 acres of MR20 to the north and east of here in this area. This is the Strata Apartments, if that name rings a bell. They're working on a second phase to that called Altura. This area over here next to the tracks is a project that's in the works called Altitude. Small lots were mentioned earlier. This area right here is MR9. And the MR9 zone allows a 4,000 square foot single family lot size, which is 1/10 of an acre. Not a half of a tenth, a full 10. And that allows some clustering. If you want to go take a look, most of this is built out, but smaller lots, smaller homes. This is called Meadowbrook.
Built by visionary.
And then commercial along the highway corridor. And then as you get up into 10th West and near the golf course, there's some pockets of industrial park. This is where Icon and Cytiva, a couple of those larger corporations, are located. And then, of course, south of here, you have the RC, which is basically ag zoning, greenbelt type of use. And here's the 11 acres right here. Directly adjacent to Nibley, directly adjacent to Thomas Edison Charter School. Planning Commission was full of individuals that came out, mostly that attend the school or Nibley residents nearby. We had 85 comments. This is the first project that we went from 0 comments the day I wrote the staff report to 85 comments 2 days later. We had a mad rush of written comments. All of the comments were in opposition. They don't like the idea of apartments next to the school. They don't like the idea of increased traffic. They had issues with crime, etc.
I think many of those letters were also sent to us at the same time.
Yes.
Although they,
So-
I mean, the school, it sounds like they have like 600 or 700 or 800 trips per day, both morning and afternoon, as I understood it. Maybe it's just one.
Well, they have 800
Yes.
students, I guess.
Yeah, so there's probably about, 600 or 700 trips per day. So that in itself creates a significant amount of traffic.
Yes, ironically, a lot of it was parents saying, I have to wait in line for my kid because I drive from Smithfield, and if these apartments are built, it's going to be that much worse of traffic. And so yes, there was a little bit of irony there.
It's going to make it worse.
That would be true if it was commercial as well.
Whatever goes there.
Yeah,
Well, the irony too is whoever builds on that piece of property only builds half of that road. What is it, west?
South?
No, what?
1200 West.
1200 West, so they only have to build half of 1200 West, and across the street is vacant land, and so you don't know when or if the other half of it would be constructed.
To the east, Nibley is currently constructing some townhomes at about 10 units per acre. And so they are constructing the other half of 12th.
Oh, they are?
That went
22.
through?
Excuse me?
Wasn't there a objection to the townhouse going in there that last one?
Yes, it went back and forth. There was a
There was
voter
a lawsuit.
referendum.
Yeah, a referendum and a lawsuit.
it ended up being, I think, a little lower density, but they're currently under construction right
Okay.
now. And that's this parcel right here. It's a mix of single family and townhome, but I think along this street is townhome.
State Supreme Court ruled in their favor, in the developer's favor.
2200 South, to your point, Jeannie, is partially developed, and this is all older homes and kind of undeveloped at this point. So this would be kind of a half of a road here along this stretch. The applicant, Josh Lowe, his main point was he wants more affordable housing. And so his proposal is condominiumizing these, having these products for purchase. Affordable housing is obviously a good thing for a city. Our problem, staff's problem, is the location. We just don't think this is the right spot. We think being adjacent to the highway and its current configuration, along with the flood and all of the long-range planning, anticipating commercial, that it should stay commercial. Comments were made that commercial also allows residential. And actually, the applicant got up and just said, well, I'll just build a vertical mixed use. That's easier said than done, especially when you're trying to do affordable housing. When you introduce vertical mixed use and you have ground floor commercial and then apartments on top, it's a much more costly type of construction. There's fire separations, there's sprinklers, there's elevators, there's all these things that are introduced. Plus, given the fact that now you have square footage of commercial, now you have to dedicate quite a bit of your land to parking that's dedicated to the commercial. And so it's difficult to achieve 30 units per
The same
acre.
density.
There's also lower height limitations in the commercial zone. So I just don't think they could get 30 units per acre or the intensity and density if they were to try a vertical mixed use project. The Planning Commission decided to continue the design review. I'll go over that real quickly just so you understand what they were trying to do. It's a combination of apartment buildings. All these larger buildings are 5-story apartment buildings. They are trying to achieve 232 total units and then some townhomes wrapped on this north corner. This is the existing property. There's those ponds, barn, and the home there. There are some kind of delineated wetlands near the pond, and so that was going to be their open space area. These are the townhomes along 2200, and then you can see the apartments kind of along the south and middle border. This is the elementary, or the charter school, Thomas Edison.
What are those lower gray that are closer to 8991?
Looks like covered parking.
Yeah, those are
Covered
just
parking.
carports.
Yeah.
Sorry, and then this is a little bit different view. You can see the townhomes in the foreground, and then the 5-story apartments here. Had some unique kind of roof lines that kind of helped distinguish themselves. They had swimming pools and clubhouses, pickleball courts, things of that nature. Planning Commission again decided to continue this to wait for the rezone outcome and then make a determination on the design review. They voted unanimously to deny or recommend denial on the rezone to you.
And you had recommended denial to them.
Staff recommended denial, again, based on the FLUP and proximity to the highway. Staff feels that commercial is the best land use for this property. Any questions?
So a statement that it will be sold for condominiums is not necessarily binding, though, correct?
Sorry, say the last
The
part.
statement that it would be developed as condominiums for sale is not binding.
Correct.
I think the way the developer explained it, the townhouses were going to be his for sale product.
Because this says townhomes and then multifamily condominium units. That they're all the 204 multifamily condominium units, but that's a choice. That's not something that
Correct, that is a choice. He was on record saying that he was going to sell everything, but it's not mandatory.
The townhomes on 100 East were supposed to be sold too. Originally, that was stated when that project was developed.
You were gonna buy one.
I know, I wanted that corner
I know,
unit.
it was really nice. I was thinking the same thing.
That's difficult to mandate because
Yeah, no, that's the same thing.
one person could buy all 10 of those townhomes
Right.
and then rent out
Yeah,
9.
Yep,
Yeah,
no,
so-
yeah, no, I know.
They couldn't sell them because it was in an opportunity zone.
And
Oh,
they-
really?
They couldn't get the tax benefits unless they held the property
Gotcha.
for, what, 10 years or
Yep.
something?
Did I hear somewhere that or someone was thinking about straightening out boundaries so that this wouldn't be Logan property?
Well, we've had discussions with Nibley before about potentially straightening the boundaries. 2200 South was a proposal. When this came up, I did reach out to the new mayor again and just say, you know, our proposal for straightening the boundary is still on the table. If there's any interest, again, I think one thing they were concerned about in the boundary exchange was they'd lose some commercial property, but now there is interest in this property for commercial. So, you know, does that make it more interesting to them? Do they want to control this piece? I mean, again, it's adjacent to them. The 2200 South boundary, the middle of that road had made sense to us as well as the middle of 8991.
I would think they'd want to.
Yeah, I've reached out again, and again, kind of depending on what happens with council's decision on this proposed rezone. Again, I've indicated we're willing to resume the discussions if they have any interest. So the ball's kind of in their court.
That's a long process too.
Right, but
From an architect's standpoint, they put a lot of work into the design of this thing prior to having a zoning. It's just like, read it.
They did, and I met with these folks 2 months before they submitted, and I explained the fluff, I explained, you know, staff's position, but they went ahead and they spent the money, and quite frankly, they're really nice renderings.
It's very nice. Good. It's a nice design.
And it's a nice design, again, it's just, we feel it's the wrong location.
Any further questions? Good to go on to the next one.
Let's move right along to Fairway Lofts. So this is another rezone. This was also a design review conditional use permit, but a much different project, much different scale. This is a small corner lot. It's about a quarter acre in size. And it's right down directly north of the fairgrounds on the corner of 400 South and 400 West. There is one existing home built in 1911, and in the mid-1940s, I don't have the exact construction date, the Fairway Market was constructed on the corner. And oddly enough, our Planning Commission member, Royland Croshaw, spoke up right in the middle of the meeting, and his father constructed this market.
Oh, really?
In 1945 is what he said.
and it was one of those original neighborhood markets.
Yes, and Logan had
A lot of them.
yeah, we had nearly a dozen of these. You know, in the 60s and 70s, they had a real heyday. And then, you know, the big box kind of slowly killed these off. We have one lone remaining corner market at the Island Market, which is endured. It's zoned NC, or what we call Neighborhood Center, along with Herm's Inn and the Indian Oven gas station up on 10th.
Gotcha.
So those are kind of the three NC zones. The NC zone is unique.
Frederico's NC also?
Excuse me?
Frederico's NC?
Frederico's is CC,
CC, okay.
Community Commercial, which is just a step up.
Okay.
Neighborhood Center is the smallest scale commercial zone that we have in the city. And they're unique in the sense that they kind of float. They're not shown on the fluff. And they're meant to kind of, you know, be neighborhood serving. So they could be located in numerous areas. This one is unique because there's already an existing structure there. The Fairway Market still exists today. Let me show you that picture. So
You should say the Fairway Market building.
yes,
The market does not exist.
you're right.
It does not exist.
The business is long gone.
That is correct.
So there it is. It's very small. I want to say 700 square feet.
It's very
Here
black.
is there's the 1911 kind of Victorian home in the back. The plan was to remove this garage in the front. And then this is looking at it from 400 westward. The neighborhood center zone also allows residential uses. And so their plan is to remodel the old home and then actually build a second unit that's very modern in design. We wanted that contrast for a total of 2 residential units and 1 commercial business or 1 commercial building.
Russ, can you tell me where on the table it says you can have a house? Because on the table it says courtyard house is not permitted, courtyard house detached not permitted, front yard house attached not permitted, front yard house detached not permitted, live work is conditionally permitted, multi-dwelling attached not, multi-dwelling stacked not, manufactured housing unit not, twin house not, townhouse no.
So there's a conflict there because on the NC specification sheet, it says residential densities are allowed at 9 units per acre. And so we'll have to check the structure types, but they would be entitled to residential uses based on 17, what's that citation?
I thought our use chart, I'm looking at the use table. Residential occupancy of a dwelling unit by no more than 6 individuals and not to exceed 2 per persons per bedroom is not permitted. But it says residential occupancy of a dwelling unit by a family is permitted. But then it says there can't be a dwelling unit in the other part of the chart.
Yeah, we'll have to double check that. I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay.
But under 1707-120, it's pretty clear that residential uses are allowed at 9 units per acre in the NC zone. And the description talks about that as well.
They want to put a drive-through in this too? it looks like.
Yeah, so that's the design portion of it. I'll touch on that real quick. Let me go back to the zoning. So currently it's a zone MR12, so it is a multifamily zone right now, along with the rest of that block. You have recreational and public zoning in the area. And then the FLUP is the same. The FLUP shows MR. But again, the FLUP doesn't show NC anywhere. So consider that maybe a floating zone. This is their plan. So they do propose remodeling the business, adding a patio. They proposed some parking lots, and about 6 driveway cuts, along with a drive-through lane. This is the home, and this is the new kind of modern unit. So Planning Commission decided to hear the design review on this one, and they concluded that the drive-through was not appropriate for the neighborhood center zone.
Yeah,
A large portion of that zone talks about character and mitigating impacts, because there's houses all around here, and the drive-through could be disruptive to that, and so they...
and awfully close to an intersection that people.
I don't think it works.
Yes,
Coming out
so
of the driveway.
our city engineer, Darren Farr, also limited the number of driveways. So they were allowed 2 driveway points, 1 up here and 1 down here, and these 3 driveways were not permitted. The Planning Commission did not allow the drive-through as part of the design review. And then some setbacks and some changes to the parking areas to mitigate kind of the visual. This parking lot down here actually is going away. And then you'll park in a driveway for the house and a driveway for the unit. And then this parking lot will service the little store.
The Island Market has no parking and no drive-up, and it works just fine. People are in and out in 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah, the other thing about this project, as you can see here, some of the streetscape is lacking. So there's no curb, gutter, park strip, trees. And with the addition of the curb and gutter, there can be parallel parking established here, which is actually really nice for the corner store. You run in, run out. That's how the Island Market is mainly utilized. So the Planning Commission did recommend approval on this one.
With those design parameters.
They approved the design review permit without the drive-through, with the changes in the driveway approach locations.
Okay.
And buffering the parking lots a little bit more. And then they recommended approval for the rezone.
For the rezone. Okay.
But if the rezone is denied, then that design review permit becomes null and void. So it's,
we're just talking about
it's
the rezone.
approved. Yeah, right. But the Planning Commission approved the design review based on the zone being approved, or contingent on the zone being approved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's probably helpful to council because you know exactly what you'd be approving.
Yes. So the applicant's already working on a redesign that eliminates the drive-through and makes these changes to the circulation and the driveways.
And so that could just be approved by staff because it's been conditioned that way, and as long as staff determines they meet the conditions, that would.
Correct. The next step would be a building permit that shows those changes, and then that would be reviewed and approved by staff for construction. So any questions on the rezone? The fact that it was an existing building really turned staff into recommending approval because it's existing structure, adaptive reuse, utilizing an already existing structure is a good thing.
My question.
The other thing is there's no NC zoning on the west side of town.
Yeah.
It's all on the east side. So this neighborhood is probably underserved from a corner market standpoint.
A little bit of a grocery desert.
Yes, very good.
Well, and
again,
the question that I did ask was, the NC zone limits the amount of commercial or the amount of commercial on a site to 3,000 square feet?
Yes.
And I asked the question in planning commission if the house, since it's going to be an Airbnb, and the extra structure, which is also going to be an Airbnb, would be counted as part of that 3,000. And Mike said no, because it was housing.
Residential, I mean, Airbnbs are residential, but it's only one Airbnb is the application.
Oh,
The other
I thought-
one is a long-term or a normal dwelling unit.
Oh, I thought they were both Airbnbs.
One is the indication I got.
Just one?
Just one, yes. Confirmed.
It'd be nice to have a market on the west side.
Yeah, I mean, it's near the pool, it's
Yeah,
near Willow
that's
Park.
really-
I think it could
that's
be
a
really
great-
handy for
great spot.
people.
Yeah.
So-
There used to be one on Second North too, on the west side too. There used to be a little market right there. I think about 300 west too. So.
There's a half a dozen events at the fairground throughout the year where there's literally thousands and thousands of people walking by this sidewalk. So there's times when this could be very, very busy.
Would be nice to get it cleaned up and get a sidewalk, and
Yeah.
a curb and gutter in. And
The Highland Market has four-way stop signs, which helps for pedestrians coming in and out and so forth. Would that be the direction here?
No.
Currently, there's one stop sign for southbound traffic on 400. And I haven't heard of changing those traffic patterns in the future. That
Because
may
it's
be
a T
considered.
intersection.
It's a T.
It's a T.
It's a T, right. This is the gate to the fairgrounds, but often that gate's locked, and so it's technically just a T. It's got a funky crosswalk. It's like this V shape
Because of the gate.
because of the gate, right? And because of those 6 times a year when you have 1,000 people walking across the street.
So that 3,000 square foot, is that a limit or a minimum?
It's a limit.
Limit.
So if this property is 0.26, would that allow for 1,000 square foot of commercial?
It's not based on the acreage, it's just 3,000 square feet per zone. And you can actually go up to 5,000 with a conditional use permit. But again, this is less than 1,000 square feet, so this is well below.
That was why I asked if the house counted.
Yeah. I like it.
But I will appreciate your looking into the fact that the use table doesn't allow housing.
Yes, I'll get that addressed. I didn't show you the elevations, but this is the modern unit next to the Victorian. And then this kind of shows different angles of the project.
It's nice that it's not all black.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a nice project.
I know the proponent talked about maybe not being able to save the garage. But
This garage is also a condition on the design review permit because it doesn't meet setbacks. So it has to be moved to the west, and it may end up being eliminated.
I know the proponent was trying to save it, but maybe it can't be saved on that particular location.
Okay. Could be cool.
Okay. Any other questions? Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
Back to you, Rich.
We have a request to appropriate $400,000 of additional funding received from CMPO toward the 100 South roadway extension. The request to appropriate $7,549 from the library interlibrary loan program. Request to appropriate $7,848 from the Treasury for specialized criminal investigation equipment.
Ooh, okay.
You meant to say
Top secret
100, 100 west,
Oh, what did I say?
100 south.
Close enough.
One of those ones.
We just looked at your financial report, and you're saying close enough.
Those 2 streets intersect.
Because it's west southern, that's why. You got the west southern.
Southwest.
Specialized equipment.
Does anybody have any questions of Rich?
I would have those out and about.
Okay, Greg, you're up.
All right, neighborhood councils. This is kind of a housekeeping, cleaning up an old ordinance. This new ordinance establishes 7 neighborhood councils. 6 are based on the school boundaries, and then there'll be 1 for Utah State University. The current ordinance, under the current ordinance, there's just 1 neighborhood council. Organizations are encouraged to, these neighborhood councils are encouraged to adopt their own bylaws, have a steering committee, have a chairperson. That chairperson will be ratified by the council. 1 member of the city council would be assigned to these neighborhood councils to kind of be a liaison to that neighborhood council. It's just there to help improve, get better information, improve communication with the neighborhoods, and to have these neighborhood councils operate more organically than
So you're codifying what we already do?
yes.
Right, when we looked at it, it was really old, and I think some people looked at the old ordinance and thought that was the way we operated, and again, it's kind of housekeeping that we're just cleaning
That's
up
fine.
so it reflects what we actually do.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the issues with this, though, you only have 6 listed because Hillcrest is not there because Hillcrest is no longer a neighborhood school. So you only have 6 neighborhood councils in the draft.
Okay.
So, and I don't know with Hillcrest no longer being a primary school, since it's now a
But I think
magnet school.
they're trying to do it with the historic boundaries of the school.
So maybe we
but
need to
the
clarify.
phrasing of that, because those are no longer the boundaries of the elementary school. Hillcrest is now part of the Adams neighborhood school. So if we're doing the historic school boundaries, I think the language needs to be tweaked a little bit. So first of all, Hillcrest is missing, and it is no longer considered, if you say based on the boundaries of the elementary schools.
And
That
Ellis
is-
is all different too.
So I think that's a bigger conversation that we need to have. Again, we
But-
probably do need to say the historic school boundaries.
Perhaps what we should do is specify what those boundaries are
Yeah.
for those neighborhoods. And just write the ordinance.
Because they could change down the road too.
Right.
Right.
And that way, if we continue the conversation that we've started about sort of subdividing neighborhoods into more, cohesive units, we could still use those historic boundaries for a council that would represent multiple neighborhoods.
And I guess one question, I mean, we had thought about addressing that in the general plan when we redo that, in a couple of years, but, again, maybe you want to deal with that sooner as far as, again, they're just very large areas, and
Right.
do you then subdivide them?
Well, we're talking about it, and the Wilson plan, the neighborhood plan that they're going to do. Oh, Mike left. But they talked to them about, you were there, they talked to them about the fact that there are different neighborhoods
Right.
within the Wilson boundary. And so they're going to treat the neighborhood plan with those separate areas
Yeah.
specified.
But
And
it
they
just
did the
has,
same in
it
Woodruff.
just has been difficult in the past to try and, I mean, we've kind of tried that a little bit in the past, and sometimes it's just difficult to have, one person from each area on the steering committee. But again, it's a goal you can work towards.
Yeah, but I think if we define it by the current way we decide what is a neighborhood, then it just stays that way in the code, and then it doesn't matter what the school district does with their
Boundaries.
more fluid boundaries.
Okay, thanks for that feedback, that's helpful.
It's that each neighbor or council could do their own template or their own, bylaws. I'm just suggesting you create a template, maybe based on some that are already established.
We actually do, and
Okay.
provide them, and they can either adapt them.
Sure, but it gives them a starting point.
Right, and several of them have adopted kind of the same
Okay.
one. And some of them don't have any official,
Bylaws.
bylaws at this point, so.
Okay, that works.
Okay, so you'll add back in Hillcrest in
Hillcrest,
some
and then
way?
we'll get either a map or something defining the boundaries.
Okay. And change that language that it's not based upon the elementary school boundaries. Okay. Thanks.
Other
Yeah, this is what
considerations?
we've been doing.
Good suggestions, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Are there any other considerations?
I suggest you put on the agenda for next meeting, election, as much as we hate to see Jeannie move off, do a new chair.
It's on there.
Oh,
Okay.
gee, you're way ahead of me.
No, Teresa's way ahead of all of us. She's like, it's the last meeting of the year, we're gonna make a change.
So someone can hit the ground running at the first one.
Well, it'll take them 3 weeks to figure out who's gonna be on which committee.
It does take 3 weeks.
Okay, any other considerations this evening? We are adjourned as the city council, and we are reconvened as the redevelopment agency.
Oops. I unplugged.
You did that last time.
Tom's like, we're ready to roll.
We have one action item this evening. Kurt?
Good evening, council, board, I guess in this case, our new board. Just a quick summary of what we introduced in the workshop.
Just talk louder.
Just talk louder, okay.
Good.
Let me just summarize briefly what we talked about in our last meeting. So we're requesting a budget amendment of $500,000 for the center block project, just due to increased expenses. So if you have any specific questions, I'm happy to go into more detail, but there you go.
And again, we do have an additional donation of $159,000 that's been pledged to offset some of that. Again, it's kind of like we did the additional $400,000 that we fortunately received from the CMPO. Just that seems to be the nature of construction projects right now, is they just are taking longer and
Costing
more. So, but we are working to
Well,
offset where we can.
I'll verify it. I am in construction, and every project has the understanding that there will be an escalation because the price of steel, wood, whatever it is, happens. And the contractor, if he had to take the risk for it, then the original price would be way up to account for the unknown.
Potential, yeah.
And I understand that even though we're allocating this money, if we don't need it, it will not be spent, correct?
Right.
Correct. This does include some contingency just to make sure we can get to the end of the project.
Public hearing.
Like I said, this is a public hearing. If there's anyone who wishes to speak to this issue, please come to the podium and state your name. Seeing no one, and Paul is zipping up his jacket, I'll bring it back to the council.
I'll move we approve Resolution 2245 RDA.
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries, and we are now adjourned.
Wow, 45 minutes early.
You sure you want me to leave?
Well, we might re-elect you.